Young police officer's wedding gift goes viral with dowry of 1 billion rupiah. The police officer thought his wedding day would be memorable, but no one expected his lavish gift to ignite a nationwide buzz. Before we go into details, click subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from. I would be glad to know this story goes as far as Canada, all of the United States of America, Australia, Africa, and even the United Kingdom. So let me know where you're watching from on comment section. I pray may the good God Almighty bless and preserve you all and your family. Amen. Let's begin. The morning sun cast long shadows across the police station in Jakarta as Officer Arjun Wijaya adjusted his uniform collar for what felt like the 100th time. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the decision he'd made 3 months ago. A decision that would change everything. At 28 years old, Arjun had dedicated 6 years of his life to serving the Indonesian National Police. He'd walked the thin blue line between justice and corruption, often finding himself alone in his convictions. While his colleagues accepted small bribes from street vendors or looked the other way when influential families broke the law, Arjun had remained steadfast. His father's words echoed in his mind daily. Integrity is not what you do when others are watching. It's what you do when no one will ever know. His father, the late Commissioner Budi Wijaya, had died 5 years ago during a raid gone wrong. The official report stated it was a tactical error, but Arjun knew better. His father had been investigating a corruption ring that reached into the highest levels of the department. The truth died with him, buried under mountains of paperwork and convenient explanations. Now, as Arjun prepared for his wedding to Sari Kusuma, the woman who had captured his heart 2 years ago at a community outreach program, he found himself at a crossroads that would test everything his father had taught him. Sari came from a wealthy family. Her father, Pak Hendro Kusuma, owned a chain of luxury hotels across Indonesia. When Arjun had first asked for Sari's hand in marriage, the response had been complicated. Pak Hendro hadn't rejected him outright, but the expectations were clear. In their social circle, a substantial dowry was expected. Not the traditional mas kawin of modest gold or money, but something that demonstrated the groom's capability to provide for his bride. 1 billion rupiah, Pak Hendro had stated matter-of-factly during their private meeting. That's the standard in our family. My daughter deserves nothing less. 1 billion rupiah, approximately $65,000. For a police officer making perhaps 5 million rupiah per month, around $300, it was an impossible sum. It would take him nearly 17 years to save that amount, assuming he spent nothing on food, rent, or living expenses. Arjun had walked out of that meeting feeling hollow. He loved Sari deeply, and she loved him. She had even offered to speak to her father, to convince him that love mattered more than money. But Arjun's pride, perhaps his greatest flaw and his greatest virtue, wouldn't allow it. He would find a way. 3 months before the wedding, opportunity had knocked on Arjun's door in the form of a silver-haired man named Rudy Hartono. Mr. Hartono was a businessman, well-dressed and well-connected, who ran several import-export companies that everyone knew were fronts for money laundering and smuggling operations. They met at a coffee shop in Menteng, one of Jakarta's upscale neighborhoods. Arjun had agreed to the meeting reluctantly, curiosity overcoming his better judgment. Officer Wijaya, Rudy had begun, stirring his espresso with deliberate slowness. I knew your father, a good man, principled, perhaps too principled for his own good. Arjun's jaw tightened. I understand you're getting married soon. Congratulations. I also understand that your future father-in-law has certain expectations. Rudy smiled, revealing teeth too white to be natural. I'd like to help you meet those expectations. In exchange for what? Arjun had asked, already knowing the answer. Just your cooperation. Nothing major. Sometimes shipments come through the port that might attract attention. Sometimes routes need to be kept clear. Sometimes paperwork needs to be filed in a way that avoids unnecessary complications. Rudy had leaned back, supremely confident. 1 billion rupiah. Cash. Untraceable. Enough to satisfy Pak Hendro and start your married life without the burden of debt. The offer had hung in the air between them like smoke. Arjun had felt the weight of it, the terrible gravity of that moment. One decision. One compromise. That's all it would take. I need time to think, he'd said finally. Rudy had nodded, sliding a business card across the table. Of course, but don't take too long. Your wedding is in 3 months, and these opportunities don't wait forever. For weeks, Arjun had wrestled with the decision. He'd barely slept, barely eaten. Sari had noticed his distress but attributed it to wedding stress. She'd been so excited, planning every detail with her mother, her eyes lighting up whenever she talked about their future together. The breaking point came during a night shift when Arjun had responded to a domestic violence call. The woman had been beaten badly by her husband, a man with connections to local politicians. When they'd arrived at the station, the husband had made a phone call, and within an hour, the case had been resolved. The woman was encouraged to drop the charges. Money had changed hands. Justice had been bought and sold like produce at a market. Arjun had watched it all happen, powerless to intervene without risking his career and, more importantly, his ability to make any difference at all from within the system. That night, staring at Rudy's business card, Arjun had made a decision. But not the one Rudy expected. Instead of calling Rudy to accept the bribe, Arjun had called his old friend from the academy, Inspector Demas Presidio. Demas worked in the Internal Affairs Division, the cops who investigated cops. They'd been close since their training days, bonded by a shared belief that the police force could be better, should be better. "I need your help," Arjun had said when they met at a quiet warung, a small family-owned restaurant far from the city center. "And it's going to be dangerous." Demas had listened as Arjun explained everything. Rudy's offer, the dowry demand, his plan to expose the corruption ring while simultaneously earning the money he needed legitimately. It was audacious, possibly insane, but it was the only way Arjun could live with himself. "You want to go undercover," Demas had said, understanding immediately. "Accept Rudy's offer, gather evidence, and then take down his entire operation." "Not just Rudy's operation," Arjun had corrected. "Everyone connected to it. Every cop on his payroll, every official turning a blind eye. All of it. That's career suicide," Demas had warned. "Even if you succeed, you'll make enemies. Powerful enemies. My father died fighting this corruption. I won't dishonor his memory by becoming part of it, but I also can't marry Sari without meeting her father's conditions. This is the only way." Arjun's voice had been steady, resolved. "Will you help me?" Demas had been quiet for a long moment, then extended his hand. "I'll help you, but we do this by the book. Every piece of evidence documented, every conversation recorded. We build a case so solid that no one can make it disappear." Over the next 2 months, Arjun had walked a tightrope. He'd called Rudy and accepted the offer, playing the role of a desperate man willing to compromise his principles for love. He'd been fitted with recording devices, attended meetings with Rudy's associates, and slowly mapped out the network of corruption that stretched from the ports to the police commissioner's office. The money had been delivered to him 1 month before the wedding, 1 billion rupiah in cash, in a large duffel bag that felt impossibly heavy when he'd lifted it. Every bill was marked, photographed, and documented by Demas's team. The money would serve as evidence, but Arjun had also ensured that it would be returned to. But here was where Arjun's plan diverged from a simple undercover operation. He needed the money to be real, to count as a legitimate dowry, but he also needed to expose the corruption. So he'd made a deal with Demas and his superiors. If the operation succeeded and resulted in major arrests, Arjun would receive a special commendation and a substantial reward from the seized assets of the criminal organization. The reward would be exactly 1 billion rupiah, legitimate money earned through legitimate police work. The tainted money from Rudy would be returned as evidence. The clean money from the reward would become his actual wedding gift to Sari's family. It was complicated, risky, and required perfect timing. The operation would culminate on his wedding day. The morning of his wedding, Arjun stood in front of the mirror in his family home, wearing his formal police uniform. His mother, Ibu Lestari, adjusted his medals with hands that shook slightly. She was a small woman, worn down by years of worry and grief, but her eyes held the same steel that Arjun had inherited. "You look so much like your father," she whispered, tears threatening to fall. "He would be so proud of you." Arjun hugged her tightly. "Ibu, there's something I need to tell you. Today isn't just about the wedding. Today we finish what Papa started." He explained everything, the operation, the plan, the timing. His mother listened, her face cycling through fear, pride and resignation. "You are your father's son," she said finally. "Stubborn, principled, and far too brave for your own good. But I trust you, and I trust that you're doing what's right." The wedding was to take place at one of Pak Hendro's luxury hotels, a sprawling complex on the outskirts of Jakarta with views of the mountains. 500 guests had been invited, politicians, business leaders, society families. It was exactly the kind of high-profile event where appearances mattered above all else. The traditional ceremony began in the afternoon. Arjun, dressed in a biskap, the formal Javanese attire, sat beside Sari, who was radiant in her kabaya and batik. The room was decorated with elaborate flower arrangements, and the air was thick with the scent of jasmine and incense. During the ijab kabul, the Islamic marriage contract ceremony, Arjun met Sari's eyes. She smiled at him with such pure joy that his heart ached. She didn't know what was coming. He'd kept her in the dark to protect her, but he knew that the next few hours would test their relationship in ways he couldn't fully anticipate. Pak Hendro stood to perform the traditional dowry presentation. This was the moment that had consumed Arjun's thoughts for months. In front of all the guests, he would present the mas kawin, the dowry, to Sari's family. Arjun stood, and Demas, serving as his best man, brought forward an ornate wooden chest. The room fell silent, all eyes on the young police officer who was about to marry into one of Jakarta's wealthiest families. "Pak Hendro," Arjun began, his voice carrying across the silent hall. "When I asked for your daughter's hand, you set a condition. 1 billion rupiah, to demonstrate my capability to provide for Sari and to honor your family's traditions." He paused, looking around the room at the assembled guests. He recognized several faces, politicians he'd seen at Rudy's meetings, business leaders who were part of the corruption network, police officials who'd turned a blind eye for years. "I am a police officer. I make perhaps 5 million rupiah per month. By simple mathematics, it would take me almost 17 years to save 1 billion rupiah if I spent nothing on living expenses." Arjun's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Many people might wonder how a young officer could possibly meet such a requirement. Pak Hendro's smile had begun to fade, sensing that something was off script. "Some people," Arjun continued, "might assume that I took shortcuts, that I accepted bribes, engaged in corruption, or compromised my principles. After all, that's how things are often done, isn't it? In this room, right now, there are people who have built their fortunes on such compromises." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sari was looking at him with confusion and growing concern. 3 months ago, I was offered exactly that opportunity. A businessman named Rudy Hartono approached me with a proposition. 1 billion rupiah in exchange for my cooperation in his criminal enterprises. Arjun opened the wooden chest, revealing stacks of cash. "This is that money." Every rupiah accounted for, marked, and documented. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Pak Hendro's face had gone pale, then red. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. Arjun held up his hand. "Please allow me to finish. I accepted Mr. Hartono's offer, but not because I intended to keep this money or to become corrupt. I accepted it as part of an undercover operation sanctioned by the Internal Affairs Division of the Indonesian National Police." He pulled out his phone and pressed a button. Immediately, recordings began to play through the sound system, conversations between Rudy and various officials, discussing bribes, smuggling operations, and the systematic corruption that had infected every level of law enforcement and government in the region. The names mentioned in the recordings included several people in the room. Arjun watched as faces went pale, as people began to edge toward the exits. As the carefully constructed facade of respectability crumbled, Demas appeared at the entrance with a team of officers from Internal Affairs. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We have warrants for the arrest of several individuals present at this gathering." The next 30 minutes were chaos. 15 people were arrested, including 2 members of parliament, a district police chief, and 4 businessmen including Rudy Hartono himself. The wedding hall had transformed from a celebration into a crime scene. Through it all, Sari sat frozen, watching her wedding day dissolve into a police operation. When the arrests were complete and the initial chaos had subsided, she finally turned to Arjun, her eyes brimming with tears. "Did you know this would happen? Today? At our wedding?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Yes, Arjun said simply. It was the only way. The only time when all these people would be in one place, relaxed and off guard. You used our wedding as bait. It wasn't a question. I used our wedding as the stage for justice, Arjun corrected gently. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that this day wasn't what you dreamed of. But I couldn't become the kind of man who would accept corruption, even for love. Especially for love. Sari stood abruptly and walked away, leaving Arjun standing alone at the altar. The story exploded across Indonesian media within hours. Young police officer turns wedding into corruption sting, read one headline. Billion Rupiah wedding gift brings down criminal network, proclaimed another. Social media erupted with discussions about corruption, police integrity, and whether Arjun had been heroic or foolish. Some praised him as a modern hero, a rare example of an officer willing to risk everything for justice. Others criticized him for ruining his own wedding and embarrassing the guests. The debate raged online and in coffee shops, in government offices and university classrooms. Pak Hendro demanded an audience with Arjun 3 days after the wedding. They met at his home, a sprawling estate with manicured gardens and security guards at every entrance. You humiliated my family, Pak Hendro said without preamble. You turned my daughter's wedding into a spectacle, arrested my business associates in front of 500 guests, and made us all look like fools. Arjun stood his ground. With respect, Pak, I arrested criminals. If your business associates were involved in illegal activities, that reflects on their choices, not your family's honor. And what about Sari? Did you think about her? About how this would affect her? I think about her every moment, Arjun replied quietly. That's why I couldn't take dirty money to marry her. She deserves a husband with integrity, not one who sold his principles for a dowry. Pak Hendro was quiet for a long moment. The money you displayed at the wedding, it's evidence now. So you don't have the billion rupiah for the dowry? No, Arjun confirmed. But the police department is awarding me a commendation and a reward from the seized criminal assets. 1 billion rupiah, paid from the confiscated funds of the organization I helped dismantle. That money is legitimate, earned through proper police work. It's being processed now and should be available within the month. So you'll have your billion rupiah after all. Pak Hendro's expression was unreadable. I'll have earned it honestly, Arjun corrected. Which was always the point. My daughter won't speak to you. She's devastated, humiliated. She locks herself in her room and cries. How will you fix that? Arjun felt his heart sink. I don't know if I can. I made a choice, to honor my father's legacy and my own principles, even if it meant hurting the woman I love. Maybe that was selfish. Maybe that makes me unworthy of her. But I couldn't live with myself if I'd done anything else. Pak Hendro studied him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He smiled, a small, genuine smile. You know, I set that impossible dowry requirement expecting you to fail. I wanted Sari to see that you couldn't provide for her, that love wasn't enough without financial security. I thought she'd eventually move on to someone more suitable. I know, Arjun said, but you surprised me. Not by getting the money. Anyone can get money if they're willing to compromise. You surprised me by refusing to compromise, by choosing the hard path, the righteous path, even when it cost you everything. Pak Hendro stood and extended his hand. My daughter is angry with you now, and perhaps she has a right to be. But I was wrong about you, Officer Wijaya. You are exactly the kind of man I would want for my daughter, if only she can forgive you. Arjun shook his hand, but the gesture felt hollow. What good was Pak Hendro's approval if he'd lost Sari? What Arjun didn't know was that someone at the wedding had recorded the entire confrontation and arrest operation. The video had been posted online and was spreading rapidly across social media platforms. Within a week, it had been viewed over 50 million times. Young people especially connected with the story. In a country where corruption was so endemic that it was practically expected, here was a young officer who had refused to play the game. Comments flooded in by the thousands. This is the kind of leader we need in Indonesia. He chose integrity over love. That's real strength. Everyone is angry about corruption, but no one does anything. This man actually did something. He risked his career, his marriage, everything for what's right. That's a hero. International media picked up the story. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, they all ran segments about the young Indonesian police officer whose wedding gift had been justice itself. Arjun found himself at the center of a global conversation about corruption, integrity, and the price of doing the right thing. He hated the attention. He'd never wanted to be famous or celebrated. He'd simply wanted to marry the woman he loved without betraying everything his father had stood for. Now his face was on magazine covers, and strangers recognized him on the street. The police department, initially uncertain how to handle the situation, embraced it. Arjun became the face of their New Generation campaign, an initiative to recruit and promote officers committed to integrity and reform. He was promoted to sergeant and offered a position in the Internal Affairs Division working with Dimas. But none of it mattered because Sari still wouldn't speak to him. 2 weeks after the wedding that never was, Arjun sat alone in his small apartment, scrolling through photos of happier times. Sari at the beach, laughing at something he'd said. Sari meeting his mother for the first time, nervous and beautiful. Sari asleep on his couch after a long day, peaceful and trusting. He tried to contact her. Calls, messages, letters, all unanswered. Her mother had told him gently that Sari needed time, that she was processing what had happened, that perhaps eventually she would be ready to talk. Eventually felt like forever. Dimas visited him one evening, bringing food and beer. They sat on Arjun's tiny balcony, looking out over the Jakarta skyline, the city lights stretching to the horizon. "You did the right thing," Dimas said, "not for the first time." "Did I?" Arjun asked. "I lost her, Dimas. I lost the woman I love. Was it worth it? You exposed one of the largest corruption networks in the country. 15 arrests have led to 40 more. The investigation is uncovering decades of systematic corruption. You've started something that will change the entire police force." Dimas paused. "But I know that doesn't help with the loneliness. My father died for his principles," Arjun said quietly. "I always admired that, thought it was noble. Now I wonder if maybe he should have thought more about the people he was leaving behind. About my mother, about me. Maybe principles aren't worth the cost if you lose everyone you love." "Your father would be proud of you," Dimas countered. "And sorry. If she truly loves you, she'll come to understand why you did what you did. And if she doesn't?" Dimas had no answer for that. What Arjun didn't know, what he couldn't know because Sari wouldn't speak to him, was the war raging inside her heart. She had grown up in wealth, sheltered from the harsh realities that most Indonesians faced daily. Her father's connections had smoothed every path, opened every door. She'd never had to think deeply about corruption because it had never touched her life directly. It was something that happened to other people in other places. Meeting Arjun had begun to change that. He'd shown her the city from a different perspective, the neighborhoods where his patrols took him, the families struggling to survive, the injustices that happened daily in the shadows of her father's luxury hotels. She'd fallen in love with his passion, his dedication, his unwavering sense of right and wrong. It had seemed romantic, noble. She'd never imagined it would cost them everything. The wedding day had been surreal. One moment she was living her fairy tale, marrying the man she loved in front of everyone who mattered. The next, she was watching armed officers arrest guests, hearing recordings of criminal conspiracies, realizing that the entire event had been orchestrated as a police operation. She'd felt betrayed, used. He'd hidden the truth from her, made their wedding day about his mission instead of their love. Everyone was calling him a hero, but where was the heroism in breaking her heart? Her mother found her crying one afternoon, 3 weeks after the failed wedding. "Darling, you need to decide. Either forgive him and move forward, or let him go and move on. This middle ground is destroying you both." "How can I forgive him, Mama? He lied to me. He used our wedding." "Did he lie?" her mother asked gently. "Or did he protect you from information that would have put you in danger if those criminals had suspected anything? He could have told me after. He could have warned me. Could he? Would you have gone through with it if you'd known? Would you have been able to act naturally? Or would your knowledge have changed everything?" Her mother sat beside her, taking her hand. "I'm not saying what he did was perfect. I'm saying that perhaps he made the best choice he could in an impossible situation. Everyone is calling him a hero," Sari whispered. "They say he chose integrity over love, principle over happiness. But from where I'm sitting, he chose everything else over me. No, sweetheart. He chose to be worthy of you. He chose to be the kind of man who deserved your love, even if it cost him that love in the process. Her mother squeezed her hand. That's not choosing against you. That's choosing for you in the only way he knew how. The words struck something deep inside Sari. She'd been so focused on her own hurt, her own humiliation, that she hadn't truly considered what it must have cost Arjun to make the choices he'd made. She began to research the corruption case, reading every article, watching every interview. She learned about her father's business associates, men she'd smiled at politely at family gatherings, and their crimes. Money laundering, human trafficking, drug smuggling. These weren't victimless crimes. People had died because of what these men had done. And Arjun had stopped them. She watched the viral video of the wedding arrests again, forcing herself to really see it this time instead of just feeling the embarrassment and pain. She saw Arjun's hands shaking as he opened the chest of money. She heard the tremor in his voice when he explained his choices. She saw the moment when he'd looked at her, before she'd walked away, and the devastation in his eyes. He'd known he was losing her. He'd known it would cost him everything. And he'd done it anyway because it was right. "Oh God," she whispered to her empty room. "What have I done?" 1 month after the failed wedding, the Jakarta Press Club organized a public forum on police corruption and reform. Arjun had been invited as the keynote speaker. He'd initially declined, still raw from losing Sari, but Demas had convinced him that he had a platform now and a responsibility to use it. The auditorium was packed. Journalists, students, activists, police officers, politicians. Everyone wanted to hear from the young officer who had become the face of anti-corruption efforts. Arjun stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. He'd prepared a speech about systemic corruption, about the need for institutional reform, about protecting whistleblowers. But standing there, under the lights, he found himself wanting to say something different. Something true. "I've been called a hero," he began, his voice amplified through the sound system. "People have praised my integrity, my courage, my commitment to justice. But I want to tell you the truth about what I did and why I did it." The room fell silent, everyone leaning forward. "I didn't expose that corruption network because I'm particularly brave or heroic. I did it because I was trapped between two impossible choices. I could take dirty money to satisfy my future father-in-law's dowry requirement, or I could refuse and lose the woman I love. Both choices felt like failure." "Your speech," Sari began. "I meant every word," Arjun interrupted. "Sorry, I'm so sorry. Not for what I did, but for how I did it. For not finding a way to include you, to warn you, to protect you from the fallout. You deserved better than to have your wedding day destroyed." "No," Sari said firmly. "Let me speak, please." Arjun fell silent. "I've spent the last month being angry with you, feeling betrayed and humiliated and heartbroken. I blamed you for ruining our wedding, for choosing your mission over our love, for making me look like a fool in front of everyone who mattered to me." She took a shaky breath. "I was wrong. You weren't." "I was," she insisted. "You didn't choose your mission over our love. You chose to be worthy of our love. There's a difference, and it took me too long to see it." She moved closer to him, close enough to touch but not quite touching. "I grew up privileged, Arjun. I've never had to make hard choices because my father's money and influence smoothed away all the difficult parts of life. When I fell in love with you, I thought I understood who you were. I loved your integrity, your dedication, your principles. But I loved them like someone loves the idea of something, not the reality of it. The reality is that integrity costs. Dedication requires sacrifice. Principles demand choices that hurt." Tears were flowing freely now. "I wasn't angry because you lied to me or used our wedding. I was angry because you made me see how comfortable I'd been with a corrupt system as long as it benefited me. How I'd never had to stand up for anything because I'd never had anything taken from me. Your father set that billion-Rupiah dowry not just to test you but to test me too. To see if I'd choose love over wealth, principle over privilege. And I failed that test, Arjun. When things got hard, when your choices made my life uncomfortable, I walked away." Arjun reached for her hand. "You had every right to walk away. What you did was the bravest thing I've ever witnessed," Sari said. "You stood up in front of 500 people, including some of the most powerful men in Jakarta, and chose truth over comfort. You risked your career, your safety, and our relationship for what was right. And I've spent a month punishing you for it because my pride was hurt. Your feelings were valid, Arjun argued gently. I didn't just hurt your pride. I betrayed your trust by not including you in the plan. You protected me, Sari corrected. If I'd known, I could have been implicated or put in danger. You carried that burden alone so I wouldn't have to. She stepped into his space, placing her hand on his chest over his heart. I understand now why your father made the choices he did. Why you made the choices you did. It's not because you value principles more than people. It's because you love people enough to be principled for them. Arjun's arms came around her, and she melted into him, feeling for the first time in a month like she could breathe properly. I missed you, he whispered into her hair. Every moment, every day. I missed you too, she admitted. Even while I was angry, I missed you. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet room while Jakarta bustled below them. Finally, Sari pulled back enough to look up at him. So, she said with a watery smile, I hear you have 1 billion rupiah in legitimate police reward money. What are you going to do with it? Arjun laughed, a sound of pure relief. I was going to give it to your father as the dowry. Complete what I started. Or, Sari said slowly, we could use it differently. What do you mean? Your father started a foundation before he died, didn't he? To support families of police officers killed in the line of duty. But it never got off the ground because of lack of funding. Arjun nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. You want to use the 1 billion rupiah to fund my father's foundation? I want us to use it together, Sari clarified. We could help families like yours, people who lost someone to corruption or violence, who are struggling without support. We could create scholarships for children of fallen officers, provide counseling services, financial assistance. We could turn your father's dream into reality. But the dowry, your father's requirement. My father already told you he was wrong about that requirement, Sari interrupted. And I've had a lot of conversations with him over the past month. He's been changing. What you did at the wedding, exposing those men he thought were respectable business partners, it shook him, made him look at his own choices, his own compromises. He's been auditing his businesses, cutting ties with anyone involved in questionable practices. She smiled. My father doesn't need 1 billion rupiah from you, Arjun. He needs to see that his daughter is marrying a man of character. You've already proven that. Several times over. Arjun felt emotion welling up in his chest. Are you sure? This is a lot of money. We could use it to start our life together, buy a house, invest. We can start our life together in your tiny apartment, Sari said firmly. I don't need luxury hotels or sprawling estates. I need you, and I need to be part of something meaningful, something that makes a difference. Working with you to build this foundation. That would mean more to me than any mansion ever could. When did you become so wise? Arjun asked, his voice thick with emotion. When I almost lost you, she answered simply. Losing you made me realize who I want to be. Not the privileged daughter who looks away from uncomfortable truths. The woman who stands beside her husband and fights for what's right, even when it's hard. Arjun kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, pouring a month's worth of loneliness and longing into it. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. So we're really doing this? He asked. Getting married? Building the foundation? We're really doing this, Sari confirmed. But maybe we could have a smaller wedding this time? Just family and close friends? I think I've had enough of huge spectacles for a lifetime. Arjun laughed. A small wedding sounds perfect. The news that Arjun and Sari were back together spread almost as quickly as the original wedding video had gone viral. Social media erupted with celebrations, debates, and endless commentary. Some praised Sari for forgiving him. Others criticized her for taking him back. Some claimed it was all a publicity stunt. Others held them up as a model of true love overcoming adversity. Arjun and Sari ignored most of it. They were too busy planning their actual wedding and, more importantly, laying the groundwork for the Commissioner Budi Wijaya Memorial Foundation. The legal work was complex. The ₹1 billion reward money had to be properly transferred, tax implications addressed, foundation bylaws written, and board members recruited. Demas agreed to serve on the board, as did Arjun's mother. They recruited 3 retired police officers known for their integrity, 2 social workers specializing in trauma counseling, and a financial advisor who donated her services. Pakhendra surprised everyone by offering to match the initial funding. $1 billion from Arjun, $1 billion from my family, he announced at a dinner with Sari and Arjun. Consider it my penance for the years I looked the other way while doing business with criminals. Papa, you don't have to, Sari began. Yes, I do, he interrupted. I've spent my life building wealth. But what's the point of wealth if it's built on a foundation of corruption? Arjun showed me that there's a cost to looking away, to accepting how things are instead of fighting for how they should be. Let me do this. Let me be part of something good. The Foundation's mission expanded beyond just supporting families of fallen officers. They created programs for whistleblower protection, scholarships for young people from underserved communities who wanted to enter law enforcement, and training programs on ethics and integrity for current officers. The work was exhausting and often frustrating. Bureaucracy moved slowly, funding always seemed insufficient for the need, and resistance came from unexpected quarters. Some within the police force saw the Foundation as an implicit criticism of their own compromises. Some politicians viewed it as a threat to their corrupt arrangements. But slowly, steadily, the Foundation grew. They helped their first family 3 months after launching. A widow whose husband had been killed during an anti-trafficking operation, left with 3 children and no income. The Foundation provided financial support, counseling for the children, and job training for the widow. Arjun would never forget meeting that family, seeing the widow's tears of relief when they explained the assistance available. I thought we were forgotten, she'd said. I thought my husband's sacrifice meant nothing to anyone but us. His sacrifice meant everything, Arjun had told her. And you are not forgotten. None of you are forgotten. 3 months after their reconciliation, Arjun and Sari were married in a small ceremony at a modest community center in the neighborhood where Arjun had grown up. The guest list was only 50 people, family, close friends, a few fellow officers, and some of the families the Foundation had helped. There was no dowry requirement this time. Pakhendra had publicly renounced the practice, giving an interview where he admitted his mistake. I confused financial capability with worthiness, he'd said. I thought money could protect my daughter. But the best protection I can give her is ensuring she marries a man of character. Arjun has proven his character beyond any doubt. Sari wore a simple white kabaya, elegant but understated. Arjun wore his police uniform, medals polished, standing tall. His mother cried throughout the entire ceremony, but they were tears of joy this time. The vows they exchanged were traditional, but they added their own promises as well. I promise to always choose integrity, even when it's difficult, Arjun vowed. I promise to stand beside you in that choice, even when it costs us, Sari responded. I promise to honor your family and your background, to remember where I came from while building where we're going. I promise to use my privilege to lift others up, to never again look away from injustice just because it doesn't affect me directly. I promise to be worthy of your love every single day. I promise to remind you that you already are. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The reception was held in the same community center, with food catered by local warangs instead of luxury hotels. Children from the neighborhood ran around playing, their laughter filling the space. It was chaotic and imperfect and absolutely perfect. Demas gave a toast that had everyone laughing and crying. I've known Arjun since the police academy. Even then, he was the guy who wouldn't cut corners, wouldn't take the easy way, wouldn't compromise his principles even for convenience. I used to think he was stubborn, maybe a little crazy. Now I understand he's simply incapable of being anything other than exactly who he is, a man of absolute integrity. Sorry, you're marrying a man who will drive you crazy with his righteousness, who will choose the hard right over the easy wrong every single time, who will probably get you both in trouble for standing up for what's right. Demas raised his glass. But you're also marrying a man who will never betray you, never lie to you, never ask you to compromise your values for convenience. In a world full of people who say one thing and do another, you found the rarest thing, someone whose actions always match their words. To the bride and groom. To the bride and groom. the room echoed. Later, as they danced their first dance as a married couple to a simple acoustic guitar version of an Indonesian love song, Sari whispered in Arjun's ear, "No arrests planned for today, right?" Arjun laughed. "No arrests. Promise. Today is just about us." "Good," she said, pulling him closer. "Because I have plans for you later, husband, and they don't involve police work." He blushed, which made her laugh, which made him laugh, and they danced in their small community center surrounded by people they loved, and it was worth everything they'd been through to get there. The viral video of the original wedding arrests had mostly faded from daily news cycles, replaced by newer scandals and stories. But its impact continued to ripple outward. The corruption case had expanded far beyond the initial 15 arrests. The investigation had uncovered networks that stretched into multiple government agencies, involving hundreds of officials. Some fled the country. Others cooperated in exchange for reduced sentences. The trial proceedings would likely continue for years. More importantly, the case had sparked a cultural conversation about corruption that hadn't existed before, at least not so publicly and forcefully. University students formed anti-corruption clubs. Journalists felt emboldened to investigate stories they'd previously avoided. Citizens began demanding accountability in ways they hadn't before. The young police officer's wedding gift, not the billion rupiah, but the gift of exposing corruption, had become a symbol. When someone stood up against corrupt practices, social media would invoke the Arjun standard. When an official took a principled stand at personal cost, they were compared to Officer Wijaya. The story had taken on a life of its own, bigger than the two people at its center. Arjun tried to stay out of the spotlight, focusing on his work with internal affairs and the foundation. But he was regularly invited to speak at schools, community centers, and police academies. Each time, he told the same basic truth. Integrity isn't extraordinary. It's simply refusing to become something you're not. But that refusal, repeated by enough people, can change everything. The foundation was thriving. With the combined 2 billion rupiah in seed funding and additional donations, they'd helped 47 families, provided scholarships to 18 students, and trained over 300 officers in their ethics and integrity program. One of their scholarship recipients, a young woman named Dowry whose father had died fighting drug traffickers, had just been accepted to the police academy. She'd visited the foundation office to share the news, her eyes bright with determination. "I want to be like my father," she told Arjun and Sari. "I want to be like you. I want to prove that good people can work in law enforcement and make a difference without becoming corrupt." "You already are making a difference," Sari had told her. "Just by choosing this path, by refusing to be cynical about the possibility of change, you're making a difference." After Dewey left, Sari had turned to Arjun with tears in her eyes. "This is what it's all about, isn't it? Not the big dramatic moments, but these small ripples. One young woman choosing integrity because she saw someone else choose it. Like corruption spreads through small compromises," Arjun said, echoing his speech from months ago. "Reform spreads through small acts of courage." "We're going to need more funding," Sari said, already shifting into planning mode. She'd taken to foundation work with unexpected passion, discovering a talent for fundraising and program development. "If we want to expand the scholarship program, provide more comprehensive support, we'll figure it out," Arjun said, pulling her close. "We always do." A year after the wedding arrests, an independent filmmaker approached Arjun and Sari about making a documentary about their story. They'd initially declined, uncomfortable with the attention. But the filmmaker, a woman named Ratna, persisted. "This isn't about making you famous," she'd explained. "It's about showing people that change is possible, that one person's choice to stand up can create ripples that affect thousands of others. Your story is bigger than you now. It belongs to everyone who needs hope that things can be different." They'd reluctantly agreed, with conditions. The documentary would include not just their story but the broader context of corruption in Indonesia and the work of the foundation. It would feature the families they'd helped, the officers trying to reform the system from within, the activists and journalists fighting for accountability. Filming was intense and often uncomfortable. Ratna interviewed dozens of people, police officials who criticized Arjun's methods, families who praised the foundation's work, experts who analyzed the corruption cases, social scientists who studied the viral video's impact. One particularly difficult interview was with Rudy Hartono, the businessman who'd originally offered Arjun the bribe. He was in prison, awaiting trial, and he'd agreed to speak on camera. "I underestimated him," Rudy said, his expensive suit replaced with prison clothing. "I thought every man has his price. I thought with enough pressure, the dowry requirement, the time constraint, the desire to marry the girl, I could turn him. I was wrong. Do you regret trying to bribe him?" Ratna asked off camera. Rudy was quiet for a long moment. "I regret getting caught," he said finally, with brutal honesty. "I regret that this young officer had more integrity than I anticipated. But do I regret the attempt? No, because in my world, everyone has a price. Officer Wijaya was an anomaly, an exception, and exceptions don't last long. He's lasted so far," Ratna pointed out. Rudy smiled without humor. "We'll see. Give him time. Give him opportunities. Eventually, everyone compromises. Everyone except martyrs, and martyrs die young." When Arjun watched that interview during the documentary's editing process, he felt a chill. Rudy's words weren't just criticism. They were a prediction, a threat. The message was clear. The system would keep testing him, keep pushing, keep trying to break his integrity until he either broke or was broken. "He's wrong," Sari said, watching beside him. "You won't break." "How can you be so sure?" Arjun asked. "Because you're not doing this alone anymore," she said. "When your father fought corruption, he was isolated. He had no support system, no foundation to back him, no public awareness to protect him. You have all those things now. We built them together." She took his hand. "And more importantly, you have me. You have our family. You have a life outside of work that reminds you why integrity matters. You're not a lone hero on a suicide mission. You're a man building something lasting, something that will outlive any one person's courage." Arjun squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her certainty. She was right. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about creating systems and cultures that supported integrity rather than punishing it. Part 15. The next generation. 18 months after their wedding, Sari discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. They'd been so focused on the foundation and their work that they hadn't fully processed what it meant to bring a child into this life they'd built. "What if they come after our child?" Arjun worried one night, his hand resting on Sari's still flat belly. "What if the people I've exposed, the people I'm continuing to investigate, what if they try to hurt our family? Then we'll protect our family," Sari said firmly. "But we won't live in fear. We won't let threats and possibilities keep us from building the life we want." "My father had the same attitude," Arjun said quietly. "And it got him killed. Your father was operating alone in a completely corrupt system with no oversight and no public accountability," Sari countered. "The situation is different now. You've helped change that. The foundation, the documentary, the public awareness, all of that creates protection that your father didn't have." She placed her hand over his. "Our child will grow up knowing their father is a person of integrity. They'll see what it means to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. They'll learn by example that one person can make a difference. What better legacy could we give them?" Arjun's mother, Ibu Lestari, was overjoyed at the news of her future grandchild. "Your father would have loved to see this," she said, tears in her eyes. His grandchild carrying on his legacy, not through corruption fighting necessarily, but through integrity, through choosing to be good even when the world makes it hard. The pregnancy progressed normally. Sari continued working with the foundation throughout, only scaling back in her final trimester. They attended childbirth classes, painted a nursery in their modest apartment, and argued good-naturedly about names. "If it's a boy, we name him after your father," Sari insisted. "Booty, that's a lot of pressure to put on a child," Arjun argued. "My father's legacy is complicated. His legacy is beautiful," Sari corrected. "He stood for what was right, even when it cost him everything. If our son or daughter grows up to have even half his integrity, we'll have succeeded as parents." They compromised on names that honored both sides of the family. If a boy, Budi Arjun Wijaya. If a girl, Lestari Kusuma Wijaya, combining Arjun's mother's name with Sari's maiden name. Part 16. The birthless Lestari Kusuma Wijaya was born on a rainy morning in Jakarta, weighing 3.2 kilograms and announcing her presence with powerful lungs. Arjun held his daughter for the first time and felt his entire world realign. This tiny person, this perfect combination of him and Sari, was now his responsibility. His to protect, to raise, to teach. The weight of it was overwhelming. "She's perfect," Sari whispered, exhausted but glowing. "Isn't she perfect?" "She's everything," Arjun agreed, unable to take his eyes off his daughter's small face. His mother visited within hours, crying as she held her granddaughter. "She has your father's nose," she said, laughing through tears, "and his stubborn expression. This little one will be a force to reckon with." Pak Hendro, who had fully embraced his role as doting grandfather-to-be, arrived with enough flowers to fill the hospital room. "My granddaughter," he said reverently, holding Lestari with surprising gentleness for such a large man. "She'll want for nothing. I'll make sure of it." "She won't want for love or integrity," Sari said firmly. "The rest is negotiable." Pak Hendro smiled. "Yes, that's what I meant. She'll have the foundation of what matters. Everything else is just details." The documentary premiered 2 weeks after Lestari's birth. Ratna had timed the release perfectly, ending the film with footage of Arjun and Sari bringing their daughter home from the hospital, a symbol of hope and continuation. The documentary was titled The Billion Rupiah Wedding, and it became a sensation. It screened at film festivals internationally, won awards, and sparked discussions about corruption, integrity, and social change across Southeast Asia. But more importantly, it inspired action. Anti-corruption organizations saw a surge in volunteers. The police academy received a record number of applications from young people who cited Arjun's example as inspiration. The foundation received donations from people across Indonesia, and even internationally. One donor's letter particularly moved them. It was from a retired police officer in his 70s. "I spent 30 years on the force. I saw corruption every day and did nothing. I told myself it wasn't my problem, that I was just trying to survive, that one person couldn't make a difference. I retired with a pension built partly on looking the other way." Watching your documentary, seeing Officer Wijaya choose integrity even when it cost him everything, I felt ashamed. I can't undo 30 years of cowardice, but I can support the next generation of officers who want to do better. Enclosed is my entire pension savings. Use it to train officers in integrity, to protect those who stand up against corruption, to prove to young people that choosing right over easy is possible. Thank you for reminding an old man that it's never too late to choose integrity, even if only with your wallet when you failed to do so with your actions. The donation was substantial, enough to fund a new wing of the training program. Arjun and Sari decided to name it after the anonymous donor, calling it the Second Chance Program, for officers who wanted to recommit to integrity after years of compromise. Part 17. 5 years later, Lestari was 5 years old, bright and inquisitive and frighteningly perceptive. She'd grown up surrounded by the Foundation's work, accustomed to her parents' dedication to justice and reform. One evening, as Arjun was putting her to bed, she asked a question that stopped him cold. "Papa, why do the bad people hate you?" Arjun sat down on the edge of her bed, carefully considering his answer. "What makes you think bad people hate me?" "I heard Mama talking to Grandma. She said that someone sent another threatening letter. That bad people don't want you to do your work." Lestari's eyes were wide but not frightened, just curious. "Why?" "Because my work makes it harder for them to do bad things," Arjun explained. "Some people want to take shortcuts, to cheat, to hurt others to get what they want. My job is to stop them, which means they don't like me very much." "Are you scared of them?" Lestari asked. Arjun thought about lying, about reassuring her with false bravery. But he and Sari had committed to raising their daughter with honesty. "Sometimes," he admitted, "sometimes I'm scared. But I do my job anyway because it's the right thing to do. Like when I had to tell teacher that Andy was cheating on the test." Lestari asked. "I was scared he'd be mad at me, but I told anyway because cheating isn't fair." Arjun felt his heart swell. Exactly like that. Being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared. "Okay," Lestari said, satisfied with this answer. Then, in the way of children, she shifted to a completely different topic. "Can we get a puppy?" Arjun laughed, kissed her forehead, and went to find Sari. He found her in their home office, working on grant applications for the foundation. "Our daughter asked me about the threatening letter," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Sari tensed. "I thought we were keeping that from her. She overheard you and my mother talking. And you know what? She handled it better than I expected. She connected it to a situation at school where she had to report cheating, understood that doing the right thing sometimes makes people angry. She's 5 years old," Sari said, turning in his arms. "She shouldn't have to think about threatening letters and angry criminals." "No, she shouldn't," Arjun agreed. "But this is the world we live in, and I'd rather she understand it honestly than be protected by comfortable lies. She's growing up knowing that integrity matters more than comfort, that some things are worth standing up for even when it's difficult. That's a gift, Sari. That's what my father gave me. I just want her to be safe," Sari whispered. "So do I. But I also want her to be good. And sometimes those things are in tension." Arjun held his wife close. "We're doing the best we can. We've built protections that my father didn't have: security, public awareness, legal frameworks. And we're raising her to be smart, to be aware, to know when to stand up and when to seek help." "When did we become these people?" Sari asked, half laughing, half crying. "I used to worry about fashion and parties. Now I'm worried about death threats and teaching my 5-year-old about integrity." "You became these people when you chose to stand beside me," Arjun said. "When you forgave me for ruining our wedding and decided to build something meaningful instead of something comfortable. I couldn't do this without you." "We couldn't do this without each other," Sari corrected. The threatening letter Lestari had overheard Sari discussing was not an isolated incident. As the foundation's work expanded and more corrupt officials were exposed, the backlash intensified. Someone vandalized the foundation office, spray painting threats on the walls. Arjun received anonymous calls warning him to back off. Sari's car was followed multiple times. The situation was escalating. Demas, now a senior inspector in internal affairs, met with Arjun to discuss security measures. "We can provide protection," he offered. "Assign officers to watch your apartment, escort your family." "That's exactly what they want," Arjun argued. "They want us living in fear, constantly looking over our shoulders. If we accept police protection, we're admitting they've won. If you end up dead, they've definitely won," Demas countered bluntly. "Pride is not worth your life, Arjun. Or Sari's life. Or Lestari's." That argument hit home. Arjun could accept risks to himself. He'd signed up for dangerous work when he became a police officer. But he couldn't accept risks to his family. They accepted the protection detail, though Arjun hated every moment of it. Having officers outside their apartment, following Sari to the foundation office, watching Lestari's school, it felt like admitting defeat. But it also gave them space to continue their work. The foundation launched its most ambitious program yet. A nationwide database of police corruption cases, publicly searchable, designed to create transparency and accountability. Every verified case of police misconduct, bribery, or corruption would be documented and made available to journalists, researchers, and citizens. The announcement caused an uproar. Police unions threatened legal action. Politicians called it a witch hunt. Even some reform advocates worried it would undermine public trust in law enforcement. But Arjun stood firm. "Sunlight is the best disinfectant," he said in a press conference. "Corruption thrives in darkness, in whispers, in the unspoken understanding that certain things aren't discussed. We're shining light on all of it. Not to destroy the police force, but to cleanse it. To separate the good officers, and there are many, from the corrupt ones who undermine everyone's efforts." The database launched with 5,000 documented cases spanning 20 years. Within a month, journalists had used it to break dozens of stories. Within 3 months, it had been accessed over 1 million times. Within 6 months, 3 police chiefs had resigned under pressure, and a dozen ongoing investigations had been opened. The system was fighting back, but the system was also changing. 7 years after the wedding that went viral, Arjun received notification that he was being awarded the Magsaysay Award, often called the Asian Nobel Prize. The award recognized his emergent leadership, moral courage, and transformative impact on Indonesian law enforcement and anti-corruption efforts. The ceremony would be in Manila, and the award came with a substantial cash prize that would go directly to the foundation. It was international recognition, validation of everything they'd been working toward. Sari was ecstatic. This is huge, Arjun. This puts everything we're doing on a global stage. The foundation, the database, the training programs, this validates all of it. Arjun was more ambivalent. I didn't do any of this for awards or recognition. I did it because it was right, because it needed to be done. I know that, Sari said. But the award isn't really about you. It's about the work. It's about telling the world that fighting corruption matters, that integrity has value, that ordinary people can create extraordinary change. Let them celebrate that. Let this moment inspire others the way your example inspired us. His mother, now 70 and slowing down but still sharp as ever, had similar thoughts. Your father would be so proud, she said, tears in her eyes. Not of the award, though that's wonderful, but of the man you've become, of the life you've built, of the difference you've made. I wish he could see it, Arjun said quietly. Oh, he sees it, his mother said with certainty. Wherever he is, he sees it. And he's smiling. The trip to Manila was Lestari's first time on an airplane. At 7 years old, she was enchanted by everything. The airport, the flight, the foreign city. Watching her excitement, Arjun felt a profound sense of gratitude. Despite the threats, the challenges, the difficulties, they'd built a good life, a meaningful life. The award ceremony was formal and moving. Arjun sat with other awardees, a rural doctor who'd transformed healthcare in remote villages, an environmental activist who'd fought illegal logging, a teacher who'd revolutionized education for indigenous communities. He felt humbled to be in their company, inspired by their stories. When his name was called, he walked to the stage with Sari and Lestari beside him. The presenter read his citation, detailing the corruption cases exposed, the foundation's impact, the cultural change catalyzed by his choices. Officer Arjun Wijaya represents the best of what public service can be, the presenter concluded. In a world where cynicism often seems justified, he reminds us that integrity is not naive, it's necessary. That one person's courage can inspire thousands. That changing the system starts with refusing to become part of the problem. Arjun's acceptance speech was brief. He thanked the award committee, acknowledged his colleagues at the foundation and in internal affairs, paid tribute to his father's legacy. Then he looked directly at the audience and spoke from his heart. 7 years ago, I made a choice that cost me everything and gave me everything. I chose integrity over convenience, and in doing so I lost my wedding, my pride, my comfort. But I gained something more valuable. I gained the knowledge that I could live with myself. That when I looked in the mirror, I recognized the person staring back. This award recognizes that choice, but it also recognizes something bigger. It recognizes that change is possible, that systems can be reformed, that corruption is not inevitable, despite what cynics claim. But here's what I want everyone to understand. I am not special. I am not uniquely brave or moral. I'm just someone who refused to compromise, and then other people, my wife, my colleagues, my community, stood with me in that refusal. That's how change happens. Not through lone heroes, but through communities of ordinary people making the daily choice to be good. He gestured to Lestari, standing beside Sari in the front row. My daughter is 7 years old. She's growing up in a world where integrity matters, where corruption has consequences, where standing up for what's right is celebrated rather than punished. That world exists because people chose to create it. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. So if this award inspires anyone, let it inspire this: choose integrity. Not because you'll win awards or recognition, but because you have to live with yourself. Because your children are watching. Because someone's watching, and your choice to stand up might be the courage they need to stand up to. The applause was thunderous and sustained. But what Arjun remembered most was Lestari's face, looking up at him with pride and love, and Sari's hand squeezing his, and feeling that despite everything, all the threats, all the challenges, all the costs, this was exactly where he was meant to be. Epilogue. 10 years later, Lestari Kusuma Wijaya, now 15 years old, stood before her class to give a presentation on the assignment. A person who inspires me. My father, she began, became famous because of a wedding gift, but that's not why he inspires me. She clicked to the first slide, the viral video from 10 years ago, her father standing at an altar surrounded by police officers making arrests. Her classmates, who had all seen the video multiple times over the years, watched with interest. My father could have taken dirty money to satisfy my grandfather's dowry requirement. It would have been easy. No one would have known. He could have married my mother, started their life together, and everything would have been comfortable. But he didn't. He chose the hard path. He exposed corruption, risked his career, and lost my mother. Temporarily, because he couldn't live with himself if he compromised his integrity. She clicked to the next slide, a photo of her father at the foundation office, working with families they were helping. What inspires me isn't that dramatic moment at the wedding. It's every moment since. It's the way he goes to work every day knowing that powerful people hate him for what he does. It's the way he refuses to be intimidated by threats. It's the way he treats everyone, rich or poor, powerful or powerless, with the same respect and fairness. Another slide, her parents working together at the foundation planning programs. My mother inspires me too. She could have walked away after that ruined wedding. Instead, she came back, apologized for not understanding what integrity costs, and spent the last 10 years building the foundation alongside my father. She gave up the comfortable life her family could have provided to work for something more meaningful. Together, they've helped hundreds of families, trained thousands of officers, and created systems that make corruption harder and integrity easier. They've changed the culture of an entire police force, one person at a time. Final slide. A family photo, the three of them at home, laughing at something off camera. But what really inspires me is this. Despite everything, they're happy. They have enough money but not too much. They have work that matters but doesn't consume them. They have love. For each other. For me. For the community they serve. They taught me that doing the right thing doesn't make life perfect. They still worry about money sometimes. They still face threats. They still struggle with bureaucracy and resistance and the slow pace of change. But they also wake up every day knowing they're building something good. Something that will outlast them. Dowry looked up from her notes, meeting her teacher's eyes and then scanning her classmates' faces. My father's wedding gift went viral because it was dramatic. But the real gift wasn't exposing corruption one time. The real gift was showing me, that you can build a good life on a foundation of integrity. That doing right is more satisfying than doing easy. That one person really can make a difference. But the difference multiplies when they inspire others to stand with them. So when people ask me if I'm going to follow in my father's footsteps, become a police officer, fight corruption, I tell them maybe. Maybe not. The specific career doesn't matter. What matters is the principle. Whatever I do, I'll do it with integrity. Whatever path I choose, I'll choose it because it's right, not because it's easy. She paused, her voice growing stronger. My father gave my mother 1 billion rupiah as a wedding gift. But the gift he gave me, the gift he gives everyone who knows his story, is worth so much more. He gave us permission to believe that being good is possible. That standing up matters. That we don't have to accept corruption or injustice or compromise just because that's how things are. That's the person who inspires me. Not the hero from the viral video, but the man who comes home tired every night and still helps me with my homework. Who tells me the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Who shows me every single day that integrity isn't a grand gesture. It's 1,000 small choices, made over and over, to be the person you want to be. Dowry finished her presentation and sat down. The classroom was silent for a moment. Then her teacher started clapping, followed by her classmates. Several of them were wiping their eyes. After class, 3 of her friends approached her. "That was really powerful," said Maya, her closest friend. "My dad always says your father is too idealistic, that the real world doesn't work like that. But watching your presentation, I thought, maybe the real world could work like that if more people tried." "My uncle is a police officer," added Reza, another classmate. "He went through your dad's integrity training program last year. He said it changed everything for him. He'd been taking small bribes for years, just little things, he said. But after the training, he realized each small compromise was making him someone he didn't want to be. He stopped. It cost him some money, made some people angry, but he said he sleeps better now." The third friend, Dewey, named after the scholarship recipient from years ago who had gone through the academy, spoke quietly. My mom is that Dewey who your dad helped. The one in the documentary. She's a detective now. She tells me all the time that without your parents' foundation, we would have had nothing after my dad died. The scholarship, the support, the counseling. It saved our family. She looked at Dowry with tears in her eyes. Your presentation talked about how your dad inspires you. But I want you to know, he inspired my whole family. He showed my mom that good people still exist in law enforcement. That my dad's sacrifice meant something. That there's hope for change. Dowry hugged her friend, feeling the weight of her father's legacy in a new way. It wasn't just about the dramatic moments or the awards or the recognition. It was about these quiet, personal impacts. Families helped. Lives changed. Hope restored. That evening, Dowry found her parents in the living room. Her father was reviewing case files while her mother worked on foundation grant applications. It was a familiar scene. Both of them dedicated to their work but always making time to look up when she entered, to smile, to ask about her day. I gave my presentation today, Dowry announced. About the person who inspires me. Arjun looked up, interested. And who did you choose? You and Mama, she said. I talked about the wedding, about the foundation, about integrity. About how the real wedding gift wasn't the billion rupiah. It was showing people that living with integrity is possible. Sari's eyes filled with tears. Sweetheart, that's beautiful. Dewey was in my class. Dowry continued. She told me how much you helped her family. And Raisa's uncle went through your training program and stopped taking bribes. And Maya said watching my presentation made her think maybe the world could change if more people tried. She sat down between her parents. I always knew your work was important, but today I really understood it. It's not just about catching bad guys or reforming the police. It's about giving people hope. About proving that doing the right thing matters. Arjun put down his case files and pulled his daughter close. You know what I realized today? Dowry asked. The billion rupiah that caused all that drama, you and Mama spent it all on the foundation. You gave it away to help other families. You could have kept it, bought a big house, lived like grandfather wanted you to live. But you didn't. Money comes and goes, Sari said softly. But the impact of that foundation, the families helped, the officers trained, the culture changed, that lasts. That multiplies. Every person we help goes on to help others. Every officer we train goes on to train others. The gift keeps giving. That's what I told my class, Dowry said. That the real wedding gift wasn't the money. It was the choice to use that money for something bigger than yourselves. To turn a personal victory into a community resource. Arjun kissed the top of her head. You understand it better than most adults. Integrity isn't about being perfect or never making mistakes. It's about consistently choosing to be the person you want to be, even when it costs you something. Even when it costs you everything, Dowry added, echoing her father's story. Even then, Arjun confirmed. Because in the end, what you lose is temporary. What you build, your character, your impact, your legacy, that's permanent. They sat together in comfortable silence, a family bound not just by blood, but by shared values. Outside, Jakarta hummed with life. A city still struggling with corruption, still fighting for justice, still learning to value integrity over convenience. But in that living room, in that modest apartment, 3 people embodied the change they wished to see. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but consistently. Every day. Every choice point. 20 years later, the documentary about the billion rupiah wedding was being re-released for its 20th anniversary. Ratna, the filmmaker, now older and more acclaimed, had added new footage. Interviews with people whose lives had been touched by the foundation's work, statistics on corruption reduction in the police force, analysis of the cultural shift that had occurred. The premiere was held at a prestigious theater in Jakarta. Arjun and Sari, now in their late 40s, sat in the audience surrounded by foundation staff, fellow officers, activists, and families they'd helped over the years. The theater was packed. Among the audience were politicians who'd pushed for anti-corruption legislation inspired by the case, journalists who'd built careers investigating official misconduct, young police officers who'd joined the force because of Arjun's example. Dowry, now 25 and working as a human rights lawyer, sat beside her parents. She'd chosen a different path than police work, but she'd carried forward the values they'd instilled. She specialized in cases involving police misconduct, working to hold officers accountable while also protecting those who stood up against corruption. The documentary played, and even though everyone in the room knew the story, it still had power. The footage of the wedding arrests, the interviews with Rudy Hartono in prison, the recordings of corrupt officials, it all felt immediate and relevant even 2 decades later. But the most powerful addition to the documentary was the new final section, a montage of impact. Families helped by the foundation now thriving. Officers trained in integrity, now in leadership positions. Students who'd received scholarships, now working as judges, lawyers, teachers, and activists. The camera lingered on one particular interview, a young police captain named Budi Prasidio. He'd been named after Arjun's father and Demas, both men who'd dedicated their lives to reform. Officer Wijaya's generation started the change. Captain Prasidio said in the interview, "They fought the battles, took the risks, paid the costs. My generation inherited a police force that's not perfect, but it's better. Corruption still exists, but it's no longer accepted as inevitable. Integrity is rewarded instead of punished. Whistleblowers are protected instead of persecuted. We owe them everything," he continued. Not just Officer Wijaya, but everyone who stood with him, who chose integrity when it wasn't popular, who built systems that made doing right easier than doing wrong. They gave us a foundation to build on. The documentary ended with recent footage of Arjun and Sari at the foundation office, working with a young family. The father had been killed in an anti-trafficking operation, leaving behind a widow and 2 small children. The foundation was providing financial support, counseling, and educational assistance. As the scene played out, Arjun explaining the programs available, Sari holding one of the children, the widow crying with relief. Ratna's voiceover provided context. 20 years ago, a young police officer made a choice that changed his life and, ultimately, changed his country. Not overnight, not completely, but measurably, meaningfully, permanently. The billion Rupiah wedding gift wasn't the money Officer Wijaya displayed or the reward he earned. It was the example he set, the message he sent, the culture he helped create. In a world where corruption often seems inevitable, where cynicism feels justified, where standing up appears futile, he proved otherwise. One person, one choice, one moment of courage that rippled outward, touching thousands of lives, inspiring millions more. The gift keeps giving. The lights came up to thunderous applause. People stood, clapping and cheering. Arjun felt overwhelmed, uncomfortable with the attention as always. But Sari squeezed his hand, and Lestari leaned over to whisper, "You did good, Papa. You both did good." After the screening, there was a reception. Hundreds of people wanted to talk to Arjun and Sari, to thank them, to share their stories. It was exhausting and humbling and deeply moving. One older woman approached them, leaning on a cane. Arjun recognized her immediately, the widow from that first family they'd helped 10 years ago. "Officer Wijaya," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Do you remember me?" "Of course," Arjun said, taking her hand gently. "How are your children?" "My oldest just graduated medical school," she said, tears flowing. "My middle child is studying engineering. My youngest is in high school, top of her class. None of that would have been possible without your foundation's help." She gripped his hand tighter. "But more than the money, more than the programs, you gave us hope. After my husband died, I thought we were forgotten. Just another police family that sacrificed everything and got nothing in return. You showed me that his sacrifice mattered, that we mattered, that someone cared." Arjun's own eyes were wet. "Your husband was a hero. Making sure his family was cared for was the least we could do. You did more than that," she insisted. "You changed everything. For us, for hundreds of families like us, for the whole system. Thank you. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for choosing integrity even when it cost you. Thank you for building something that outlasted one case, one arrest, one moment." Similar conversations happened throughout the evening. Person after person, sharing how the foundation had helped them, how Arjun's example had inspired them, how the culture change had affected their lives. By the end of the night, Arjun was emotionally drained. As they drove home, Now, with discreet security that had become routine over the years, Sari noticed his exhaustion. "Too much?" she asked. "No," Arjun said thoughtfully. "Not too much, just overwhelming. All those people, all those lives touched. I never imagined it would become this big." "That's because you weren't doing it to be big," Sari said. "You were doing it because it was right. The bigness just happened as a natural consequence of choosing right consistently, over and over for 20 years. Lestari, sitting in the back seat, leaned forward. "You know what I realized tonight? The viral video made you famous for one moment of courage. But what really matters is the 20 years of smaller moments that came after. Every family helped. Every officer trained. Every compromise refused. That's the real story. Your generation has wisdom," Arjun said, smiling at his daughter in the rearview mirror. "It took me years to understand what you just articulated." "I had good teachers," Lestari replied. "I watched you both build this life, this work, this legacy. Not perfectly, but persistently. That's what I learned. Persistence matters more than perfection." They drove through Jakarta's streets. The city transformed from 20 years ago. Cleaner, more orderly, with visible signs of reduced corruption. Not perfect, far from it, but better. Measurably, meaningfully better. The gift that keeps giving in the end, the billion rupiah wedding gift, was never really about the money. It was about a choice to value integrity over convenience, principle over comfort, long-term impact over short-term gain. Arjun Wijaya made that choice at 28 years old, standing at an altar in front of 500 people, risking everything he loved for what he believed was right. That single moment of courage created ripples that spread far beyond anything he could have imagined. But the real miracle wasn't that moment. It was all the moments that followed. 20 years of waking up and making the same choice again. 20 years of refusing to compromise, even when compromising would be easier. 20 years of building systems, training people, helping families, and slowly, persistently changing a culture. The viral video captured one dramatic moment. But drama is easy compared to consistency. Anyone can be brave for a moment. The real challenge is being brave for a lifetime. Arjun and Sari did that together. They built a marriage on integrity, raised a daughter to value character over comfort, and created a foundation that helped thousands while inspiring millions. The corrupt officials Arjun exposed that day at his wedding were just the beginning. The real victory was the culture shift that followed. A generation of police officers who chose integrity because someone had shown them it was possible. A population of citizens who demanded accountability because someone had proven it could work. A society gradually learning that corruption wasn't inevitable, just habitual, and habits could be changed. 20 years later, Indonesia still struggled with corruption. The fight was far from over, but the battlefield had shifted. Integrity was no longer naive, it was strategic. Whistleblowers were protected, not persecuted. Young people entering public service saw paths to advancement that didn't require compromise. The billion rupiah that had started it all had been spent long ago, transformed from currency into impact. But the real wedding gift, the gift of hope, of example, of proof that one person's courage could spark systemic change, that gift kept multiplying. Every officer trained in integrity trained others. Every family helped went on to help others. Every person inspired by the story made their own choices for good, creating more ripples, more change, more hope. That's what Arjun understood now, 20 years later, that he couldn't have understood at 28. The most valuable gift you can give isn't money or power or success. It's permission to believe that being good matters, that standing up is possible, that individual choices accumulate into collective transformation. His father had given him that gift at the cost of his life. Arjun had paid it forward at the cost of comfort and safety and ease. Now his daughter and her generation were carrying it further, building on the foundation he'd helped create. The billion rupiah wedding gift had gone viral because it was dramatic. But it endured because it was true. Because beneath the spectacle was a simple message that resonated across cultures and generations. Choose integrity, even when it costs you. Stand up, even when you stand alone. Build something good, even when the world makes it hard. Do that, and you give a gift that keeps on giving. Not for 20 years. Forever. Watch out for more. Watch out for more.